Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Apollo 10 and a half, A Space Age Childhood. So, I want to right now go ahead and apologize for anybody who was to have written this movie, because I'm going to be brutally honest here. Because for this film, immediately, like, the thing that I would say for anybody who was to have kind of plopped this movie down in front of somebody and, hey, like, make this a movie, and then someone would go on and say, it's like, well, what is the movie about? And the movie is really just about a time period. Every single thing that goes on within a time period and is to really just focus on Houston. And so really we go on and we have to have like certain kind of things that tie in to what the kind of the main real story is, which is to be Stan, who is to be weirdly picked to be this kid astronaut, which honestly doesn't make sense. It just feels like out of the millions and bajillions of kids that they could have picked, they're like, oh, well, this kid is smart enough out of everybody. So like we really just have to pick this kid because he's average, but man is like, does it seem like he has more potential than anyone else? Just very odd or bizarre, this movie. But really with this film, we kind of have to way overly explain every single thing that is to be coming down the pipeline within like the late 60s to early 70s and explain it in depth. Hey guys, do you want to hear about TV shows that were to all happen within that time period? Because you're going to get 30 different examples of of shows that happened. Hey, movies? Here's about like 10 movies that came out during that time period. Hey, like music? Here's like 5 different bands that all came out during that time, but they're going to continue to splash certain songs and certain things into, of course, uh, the movie to just kind of like, hey, here's another thing that has to be completely different than what they said X amount of minutes before. So this movie does ride on nostalgia. This movie, of course, is to basically not really be a movie. It's just really straight up a documentary, showcasing basically the entire evolution of the Houston Astro Stadium. Is to go on and showcase what people would go on and do when they're in Houston, which is to basically go into a Houston like Disney World equivalent in this film. And we also have it where Stan, of course, is to go on this mission to make it to the moon well before certain other people are going to. And what he kind of does is copy and paste of exactly what the other astronauts actually do. And so, yeah, it's just like, it's a lot of copying and pasting going on here. And like, I'm not at all like applauding the effort whatsoever, because it just feels like an overly just like, man, this must have been a real easy film to just slap together. Um, because really all that you need to do is just like find out what was all going on during that time period, or just find certain people who were still to be alive during that time period, and just kind of come up with a lot of like different kind of stories and scenarios and whatever. And so I'm just like, there's not a lot of effort put into here. uh like, I like the visual and way that this movie's presented, because it kind of feels like a Scanner Darkly kind of movie. But yeah, but again, it's just like it's a documentary plus also it's like a heavy amount of examples of like we also had like board games and they basically just slap all the board games all over the screen like it's like hey guys like we're gonna go on and go to a baseball game. Here's all the baseball teams that existed during that time period. Like that's what it feels like everything was to go on and do. Like they didn't actually go to a baseball game in this movie, but like I'm just making the perfect example of just every single thing. They had to make every single example showcasing like everything. And even no and even they technically did do baseball. Like you can kind of see a bunch of just baseball cards they're kind of stacked up off to the side, and so yeah, they do that also. So it's like there is no thing that is not left not done, with the exclusion of just obviously there are certain sports that didn't focus on like football or something like that. Tried to like kind of keep it to where like the sports thing was kind of like besides baseball was kind of left at like a minimum, so they can kind of try and go on and not have it so like a certain kind of Houston state like focused. But anyways, with the exclusion of just like NASA and all that kind of stuff. So, anyways, with that said, like I had enjoyment of this movie just because like I like watching. Like VH1 had a lot of those like I love the 70s and I love the 80s and 90s and whatever. Like I like those kind of specials, but like this movie overall was just like it was okay, but it was exhausting just because I'm like, oh my god, like I don't like how this movie is to have been put together. Really, I had to go on and I watched half of this movie and then I stopped and took a good long break. And then I was like, oh, okay, let's go and finish up the other half because I'm like, seriously, this is this movie. This is how it's broken down to me. I'm just like, no. Like, I was seriously expecting them for to go on, and we have Stan, who is to have this one sister, who I think is working at like a Baskin Robbins, where they had like 31 flavors, and I was seriously expecting them to break down every single ice cream flavor uh, in this ice cream shop, and I was just like, oh my god, like seriously, we're breaking down ice cream because they broke down food, like they broke down every single food that would be like made during that time period, just like, even food, like you can't even avoid not breaking that down. So I was just like, man, this movie just has to have everything. Like I was just getting so annoyed with it having to just like, oh, like during a whole month's worth of food, we'd go on and have this rotation of cream corn and why, why, just what a like, and like this, like they also should have gone on and really just done a time period that I think a lot more people could reflect on, but like instead they go on and do this time period where it's like people are getting like paddled in school and like there's just a ton of stuff where I feel like people like like can relate but can't relate to because like they just give way too many examples of all this stuff of all these shows that I think people are going back now and streaming and trying to go on and enjoy after the fact. But anyways, let's go on and let's just go into that double five time territory. I'm going to try to do my best to just talk about this movie, but I'm not going to go into like the huge, massive undertaking that this movie goes into. and is to just like list like 30 different things of everything. Um, like as if this is Baskin Robbins and we gotta just go into detail about the life that we have all led during a certain time period. Because really, we don't have a character that reflects on any of this stuff. He just rattles it all off, and he doesn't say like, "Oh, well, like this is my favorite thing, and this is the reason why." It's just really him just saying like, "Oh yeah, this came out around that time, and there was something unique about it." But like, but wait, there's more rattling off. Like none of it feels like really personal. It's just like, pleh. Anyways, let's go on into spoilers, everybody. Spoilers. So we of course go on in the beginning of this movie, somewhere close to the beginning, because I don't know, maybe there's a billion things we have to describe before we even get to the one school part. Stan, of course, is to be narrated by Jack Black, and Jack Black is kind of doing a lot of the heavy lifting in this movie because no one else really talks in this film as much as Jack Black does, and he's the narrator, so that tells you a lot. So we have Stan who goes on, and he, of course, is to be playing at recess, and it seems when these guys are to go on and get disciplined, that there are to be teachers that are to draw this circle in one of these bricks, and the kids have to go on and they have to stand on their tippy toes while like kind of until like recess is over. And Stan is to have this strategy where he kind of like hunches down, so this guy is to go on and like draw this brick so Stan can go on and be like a lot more like comfortable while he's standing up against this brick, because Stan is to seemingly get in trouble a lot because he, of course, to get in trouble, and then at some points they discipline these kids by hitting them with paddles, which is to be these kind of big wood kind of things. Because of course, if you go on and watch movies like Dazed and Confused that have like Ben Affleck in it, you'll see that there's just a time period where people were to smack people in the butt, and like we would go on and have like kind of certain stand-up comedians that are to go on and mention how like a whole neighborhood can go on and like discipline this kid for whatever reason and smack them on the butt, and so like you'd have jokes like that. So so we have it where Stan is getting pulled out of class via both a guy named Bostic and Krantz. And so these guys are giving Stan this opportunity to go into space. And Stan cannot go on and tell anybody about that he is to go on and do this, and that he also is going to have like his family and his friends and everybody be actually told that he was to have gone to some summer camp during that summer instead of actually going on to space. And so Krantz is to have this whole backstory given to Stan about him mentioning about that he thought that it was great, but there was also some like unsavory things about this whole camping experience. So we go on into this story, and so Stan is to go on of like, well, like, why are you guys even needing to have me go into space? And Bostic is to mention that they accidentally were to go on and build this one uh, like kind of space thing like inaccurately, that it seems that they didn't build it for a normal like adult person. They went on and built it for someone accidentally that is a lot smaller. And so Stan is like, well, why not just bring a chimp into that thing and kind of go on and have the chimp do it. And the guys are just like, well, like, because chimps don't speak English. You do. And so every reason is just saying that this kid is going to have to go on and do this thing. And so Stan agrees to it. So Stan is to immediately go, after saying yes to this, he is to go into the centrifuge and then he is to hurl. And so after that, they transition into the grocery list of a movie that is to go on and explain like every single thing within Houston or within this kid's like frame of seeing things. So we go on and we have to explain Houston and how they of course have the Astrodome, and that of course there was to be like a certain like kind of lights and things put into the stadium, and every single time someone was to make a home run, they ended up not just calling it a home run, they ended up calling it something else specifically. So we go on, and supposedly for this stadium, instead of going on and pushing a shovel into like kind of like cementing that the stadium was to get built, instead they fired all these guns into the ground, bizarrely, to like to make this kind of like a very like iconic occasion. So we go on into this film, and so they showcased us that we have this kid who is to go on and is to watch like a plethora of different kind of TV shows, and that it seems that everybody was kind of scrambling by the TV all the time to desperately try to fight over who was going to watch what TV show, because we have of course Stan rattling off every single TV show that was coming out, whether specifically they were kind of mentioning the Twilight Zone or like some late night show called Weird that seems like a like for me like the late at night like Monster Vision. Like they kind of had like these really late night monster movies and stuff like that, and they go on and they just kind of rattle off all the things that were ever to go on to TV. It seems that Stan is to specifically mention like shows like that has something to do with time, where it's like it's about time, or like there's another show where they talk like something about time, and so Stan is to kind of mention like all of these shows like Batman from the '60s was one of them, and like My Three Sons I think was another one of them, and Bewitched, and like all these other things, and like those are the most like kind of quick ones that kind of rattle into my brain. So we go on and we have us have Stan go on and talk about his family, and uh, of course, while he's also talking about his family, he's going on and talking about some other family, some neighbor family, where it seems that this other neighbor family, like the mom, was to just go on and leave like her youngest kids, or her oldest kid, to take care of like their like youngest kid, which is basically be this like toddler, while the mom went in to the house and just cleaned all day. And so at one point we had this like toddler who was just kind of sleeping on this road, and one car has almost run this baby over, and so like luckily they stopped, and then the oldest kind of grabbed the kid and was like, okay, we're gonna take this kid. So as well as of course like Stan going on and talking about certain specific family members of his, like kind of going on rattling off about like his grandmothers and his grandfather, and of course how like it seemed like there was one like grandparents that was to go on and save everything, like it was going to be the end of the world soon, because it seems that both grandparents were to have these kind of conspiracies that the world may end soon, and seems that one of the grandparents was around during the Great Depression, and they were immediately thinking that someone like another Great Depression was going to come sometime soon. So we have one of Stan's uh, grandparents that is to have these conspiracy theories going on and talking about how JFK isn't actually dead, that he's just a vegetable, and since like JFK shouldn't couldn't have been shown out there as some kind of vegetable because he was our president technically, that like they're going on and they're like still having him kind of like somewhere like being held, and I'm just like, so what now? Like what? Like why would they go on and like conceal that from us? That seems kind of weird. And so we find out that that's actually Stan's mom's mother, and so she's like, "Ma, like you and your conspiracies, just stop it. Like it's just crazy talk." So so we go on into this movie, and so they're at some points going on and like talking about movies, because at some point they are to go to the movie theaters, as well as to also going to this bowling alley where it seems that Stan is to go on and spend more time at the arcade doing these pinball machines, where it seems like he's kind of standing next to these other guys that are trying to take full advantage of these pinball machines, and they're going on and like putting these little things that are to kind of have like as supports, so these guys can play these pinball machines a lot longer, and these guys have like a ton of tricks up their sleeve to go on and get free games, and Stan is trying to figure out how to have done those same tricks, but he can't go on and like it seems like he doesn't have the right touch like they do. So we have it where these guys are to have figured out like all of these like kind of hidden things to get these high scores, and so like Stan is just in amazement as he's watching on as these guys have kind of just rigged this place. So we have Stan that goes out to the movie theaters, and so they either go to an actual theater or they go into a drive-in into this movie. So like really to go on and really just try to understand what's going on here is a little like confusing, because they kind of go to a movie theater a lot. Stan, of course, is to go on with his one grandmother to go to the Sound of Music, because she takes them to see that every single year. And Stan is just like, well, I don't know why they keep showing like the Sound of Music all the time, but really, when it comes down to it, like Stan is just like, well, like I guess I can compare the Sound of Music to my grandmother, where it's just like, well, like this movie like doesn't have much fault to it, so like we can just kind of love it just because like there's like nothing wrong with us kind of consistently going and seeing the Sound of Music, as well as us like consistently being with our grandmother. So we go on and we have Stan, who is to talk about the thorough like rotation of movies, where it's like the movie It, which of course is not the clown movie, it's some other film, and they go on and rattle off all these other movies that I like can't really remember, because to me, never heard of a lick of any of them, and so like going on like I think they had in one like drive-in there was like Swiss Family Robinson, and like okay, that name of that movie sounds familiar, but anything else that they named, I'm like, I've never really heard of this in my life, as far as movies that they kind of keep continuing to like plop into this film. So we go on and we have Stan, who is to talk about the rotation of food that, of course, is to be in their household. Going on and mentioning that it seems that they were to have things like creamed corn. Uh, of course, we had it to where Stan's mom was to consistently make the ham last by going on and consistently uh, making every bit of this ham into other kinds of meals, which, of course, like families would go on and do the exact same thing still to this day. Like going and having like ham like on certain holidays and then turning around and having to like, well, here's a ham sandwich. Like here's this meal that I'm just kind of chopping up the ham and here you got like people still do that to this day because really I would go on and I would be evidence to that because like we've gone on and just kind of made like pork fried rice, but instead of the actual pork part, it would just be ham. And I'm like, oh, okay. So it's just trying to get rid of that ham somehow. Because usually it's just like nobody is really just like, man, I just love ham and consistent bits of it, to where it's like you got to figure out how to adjust and whatever. So we also had moments where, of course, Stan's mom was to have to go with every single kid to make lunch meals for that whole week. Their mom would go on and try to freeze every single meal, and then a lot of kids would go on and realize that like the meals are still technically frozen. Like the bologna sandwich that Stan was to get was like, yeah, this is like bah, like it's still cold. So like it's not quite thought out all that good. So, but it's just the fact it's like you got to make a lot of meals for a lot of kids throughout a whole week's time, and so it's just like it's really complicated. So, really, for my family, we just like I just always had for like the most point, um, like I just had like whatever meals was at lunch, just because it's like making an actual like meal for me to like go on and lunch. It's just like I would just rather just make that food, eat it now, and like lunch would just be like, meh, whatever. So, or really, I would just probably want to have that meal like throughout the day instead of having to go on and like actually have to eat the whole thing during lunch. So that is what it is. So, further through this movie, we have at some point where we're going on and talking about music. It seems that considering there's a mixture of girls and guys within this kind of this kid's family, it seems that they were to go on and mention that Stan was to have a lot of friends of his that were girls that were to have songs out on the radio about them. And so they just started rattling off every single song that had a name of anybody. And so there is even at a point in this movie where they go on and they have a song that is to have been like censored and has a beep, and they would go on and sing that song because of course because it's like a fun little thing to just kind of make fun of how it has to be forcibly censored. So uh and it seems like Stan, like his sisters, I guess at one point, like one of his sisters is to really love music, and she had the best collection of music compared to everybody else. It seemed like she liked the Beatles, and so she was to go on and talk about all the hidden messages and like all of the stuff that uh, she, of course, was to like, oh yeah, like this song is actually to be like LSD and we had Stan, I guess, who was to go on and see like the 2001 Space Odyssey, which is kind of what this movie is to really just kind of hold itself onto. And I guess Stan was to go and tell anybody who is to not have like heard or seen the 2001. He goes on and just starts rattling off what all happens within 2001. I've already technically reviewed 2001 Space Odyssey, so go ahead and check out that review. I'm not going to talk about it again, because why? Because 2001, it's a fun movie, weirdly. But yeah, I'm never going to re-describe that film. It's weird. So I guess that could be one movie that I've technically seen, and I completely forgot about. So we we find out that Stan's dad is this shipping and receiving guy for NASA, and Stan is to also rattle off and mention that it seems like a lot of neighbors that are also in this same uh, kind of community are to also do something tied with NASA. They are to make astronauts helmets or suits, or like kind of be engineers and stuff like that. So Stan's dad is to go on and be this shipping and receiving guy, which basically is to mean that he's kind of a garbage man in a lot of ways, because in all honesty, like, I've worked in receiving and stuff like that, so really, like, a lot of times you have to go on and do jobs that nobody really wants, and it's just like a crap job, and you have to go on and be the guy who is to kind of sign for stuff that is to come in shipped, and eventually you have to go on and figure out how to throw things away. So, but really, there's a number of also other like things that you have to go on and you also have to do, but I'm not going to exhaust that time and rattle off all that crap. Um, but yeah, it's a really dirty job, and I really don't understand why this guy is to be wearing like a suit and tie to his job if he's like technically a shipping and receiving guy. Like, he must just be like watching over everybody and he doesn't do a thing, because we don't really see him actually do his job at all. Like, we just say, oh, he's a shipping and receiving guy, and he's did like we don't see him actually do his job ever. It's weird. So, but we have it to where Stan is to make up what actually his father does to all of his other classmates, and he's fibbing and lying. And so Stan's mother is to mention to Stan, it's like, well, hey, it seems that like a lot of your like friends from mothers and fathers that I've talked to have mentioned that you're saying stuff about your father that isn't really true. And Stan is just like, well, can't dad just have like a better job in NASA? Like, can't he just be an astronaut or something? So like, I can go on and just like have uh a dad that I can just like be more honest about. So we have at some points within this movie. So Stan's dad is to go on this road trip, and so at some point we have Stan, who of course is drinking beer in this car because there wasn't any like law against it. There wasn't like a DUI or anything like that, and so of course you have to mention this, that this guy's just go on and like just start drinking beers while he's driving, and instead of going on and chucking uh the beverage outside of his window like I guess white trash would, instead we just have it where we have Stan's dad that kind of just chucks it in the trash for him to go on and have his older son just like go on and throw that in the trash later. So we also have it where Stan's dad is to go on and put the cap that he kind of tears off from this drink, and he puts it inside the drink, which I think is just kind of weird. And so I guess there was at one point there could have been a number of people that could have choked from that. But anyways, Stan was of course to say that that was actually very appreciative to have his father go and like kind of tear the lid off of that drink and kind of put it inside the drink, because it seems there'd be a huge cluster of parking lots that are just kind of filled to the brim with all of these kind of ripped off pop things, and those could really cut into somebody. I'm like, yeah, hence why like you don't like you'd upgrade the cans that would just kind of do this pop thing, and then you can kind of drink it right there, and it's like it's not tearing it off, which kind of seems bizarre. It just feels like, hey, like let's try to not like pollute all over the ground and come up with a better way to just have people drink a beverage, because I feel like there's possibly a lot of possibilities where everyone was starting to get sued for the way that these things were to eventually be presented. So, because people probably cut the lip at a number of things, so yeah, people will probably get sued. Anyways, pushing on. So, we go on into this movie, and I think I've almost like felt like I've kind of explained a lot of the rigmarole about this movie. Like I think I also didn't like mention like the one thing where like Stanley's grandpa was within like the time period of Great Depression, and so Stanley's grandpa is to consistently keep these nails, and so we have the one moment where Stan is going on and trying to straighten these nails that are very bent, and like once like the grandfather is kind of like showcasing like that this kid can go on and straighten this nail. He's like, "Oh, hey, yeah, great, and now we can kind of keep these nails in here forever." I'm like, this is so much like why are we seeing this in this film? Um, why am I even mentioning it? Why? Waste time. You're a waste of timer. Yeah, I get it. Anyways, so we go on and we thoroughly explain every single thing in our lives. And so Stan is to have this older sister that is to work at this ice cream thing. And she goes on and she is to supposedly she can give like 2 free scoops of ice cream. And it seems that this girl was to go on and be able to have like herself like 2 free scoops. But then she started to get really sick of the ice cream and like, well, probably after you go on and after probably 30 different shifts of you trying like 30 different ice creams, then after that you probably just go on and just be like, nah, like this sucks. Like, and maybe you're just like, yeah, I don't want to like consistently be like going and having ice cream, because like really you can probably put a lot of weight on by having a consistent amount of ice cream, because it's not exactly healthy if you go on and watch stuff like The Biggest Loser and whatever, to just kind of like ice cream in moderation, like small amounts, like but like if you go on and you have like consistent bowls or whatever, it's just like meh. Anyways, pushing on. So Stan and her and his oldest brother are, I guess, to consistently go to this ice cream place to kind of pick up uh, their oldest sister, and so we go on and we now have it where Stan, of course, to get this free thing of ice cream, and so like the oldest brother, of course, to always ask for vanilla, and so like his sister is like, seriously, out of all the flavors that you can possibly ask for, you're gonna ask for vanilla. And Stan is like, well, hey, like in his brain, he's like narrating. He's like, well, hey, yeah, you got to give it to him. Like he liked one flavor and he's sticking with it. So uh, like for me, I would go on and I never like went on and explored as far as when I would go on to any place to go and get food. Like I would never go thoroughly in depth with the menu and whatever, and kind of fiddle with things and try new meals and whatever. A lot of times I would just immediately go with like, hey, this looks good, and like if it tasted good, then that's what I was sticking with. Very rarely do I ever change anything on the menu when I go to somewhere. So like if anybody was to go on and like, hey, like I'm gonna go to so and so like restaurant, what do you want? and I would just be like the usual because I would always get the same thing. And so they'd like most of the time they would never be able to mess up my order because I'd always get the same thing. So it's just like, okay, well that would always be easy because I would never change what I would want because it's just like, oh, okay, well I always like this meal, why change anything else? But every once in a while I just wanted to probably like explore, but it was just like, why mess up a good thing? Like really, if you're going on and you're having something uh, that you know is good, why not go on? Like, why go on like, yeah, I want to try that burger and it's gonna taste like garbage. I'm gonna waste my money. But hey, it's just trying this garbage burger that tastes like like. It's really what it probably comes down to. It's like you're worried that you're gonna find, you know, oh man, I'm gonna just explore and it's gonna taste like garbage, and I wasted my monies. So let's go on. So Stan is to uh, Stan, of course, is to go on, and now let's go back with the whole astronauting thing. Because like halfway through this movie, they finally realize, yeah, we should go on and go back to the whole astronaut thing because we kind of explained everything that happens during this whole time period within the first half of this film. So now Stan is to go on and he is to go through the centrifuge and he hurls. And Bo Stick is mentioned. It's like, well, hey, everybody hurls the first time. So Stan is to go through all of these certain like hoops that he has to kind of run through to eventually get either sick or to eventually like they have these consistent things where it's like, hey, you're probably going to hurl. You're probably gonna you might fail at this. So Stan is to go and jump through all these hoops, and it seems that he's very successful out of it. Like I think the centrifuge, they were kind of very surprised that this kid didn't pass out because normally everyone else would usually pass out, but this kid just hurled. So it's like, hey, that's impressive. So we go on and have Stan who does all of these uh, like he has to run through these scenarios for them possibly having certain problems with the ship, as Stan is to have this kind of like this fake liftoff where it seems that there could be these scenarios where there could be problems with the computer or possibly just kind of certain problems where he is to mention to the exact number of degree of what problem they are to exactly have. And so they're running through all these scenarios and they immediately go on here. We have Krantz, who's Zachary Levi, who's mentioning like, well, hey, like once we get through this whole scenario, like we're gonna go on and all like share beers, and like Stan's gonna get a Coke, and Stan is like, sure, sure. So we go on and come to find out they can't figure out how to fix this problem, and so they forcibly have to abort this mission. And so their superiors are kind of like are are kind of just furious at them because they're like, seriously? It's like, so if this would have been a problem that would have actually happened, we would have had to forcibly like because we spent like tons and we would have to have spent tons and tons of money for this kid to go out into space for him to just turn around with his like tail between his legs because you guys couldn't figure out what was wrong and how to fix it. And so like what are you guys going to do if you guys really legitimately have a problem when this like astronaut goes out there? So Stan, I guess, is to become so easily like able to have this ship go off into space that basically he's reading some like Mad magazine while he's kind of waiting for the ship to just kind of rocket off. because it's like for him, like he can go on and just kind of like do this whole thing blindfolded because they had to force him to do it blindfolded and him know exactly where every single button is. So like Stan could kind of do this whole thing in his sleep if that's really what he had to do. So we go on and we have Stan who rockets off to the moon. And then, of course, he is to go on and do every single precaution. Everything is to go on very well. And so Stan is to go on and make it to the moon. And he, of course, to land this whole thing perfectly himself. And so Stan then makes it onto the moon. And so basically, every single moment that is to play out here is to play out just like the very first moon landing, and every single scene is to be very identical to that same exact moment. And like Stan is doing the exact same actions as the other guys are, and we kind of see it from frame to frame, the identical part of this. So Stan goes on and is to like scoop up certain uh, moon things here, like certain moon rocks and stuff like that. We also had it in the thing that I kind of can see here, which kind of reminds me that we had certain games that they, of course, were to play during this time period, and so like at one point they were to play this game called like Statues, where like people would kind of get chucked around and they would have to come up with these statues, and then everybody had to like say like what kind of statue they were. And one girl was to mention like a pancake, and one person was to mention like an astronaut, and so on and so forth. And it was just like, okay, that's a very bizarre game. And they ended up kind of playing like several different variations of baseball. Um, and so I thought that that was kind of like unique uh, for this film, where they had kind of like this like baseball thing on this like concrete at the beginning of this film, which I thought was really odd. So, and like we also had the one like baseball thing that was technically done in that garage where they had like this moment where uh, like they had like this dugout moment where everybody like was supposed to like try to like run out to the mound and start to beat up the pitcher and all this goofiness. So, and then we had this one kid who was to go on and shoot off rockets, and he had this like grasshopper and the kind of the saddle, or the kind of the like the one like thing that they kind of tied to this little thing, this little box that they tied to this rocket to have this like grasshopper be shot out. So, and they also had certain like playground like things that kind of looked uh like rockets. Like they had like little like things you can kind of climb up to, and like it would have this kind of like spaceship that had this steering wheel in it. So kind of everybody being reminded about like them going to space, trying to possibly inspire kids to become astronauts, I guess, at some point, because everybody was trying to make it to the moon. And they would go on and explain like every single people that had possibly failed, and that all the astronauts who are to be kind of hopeful to go on and be very memorable here, kind of like Neil Armstrong was. I think that's the main one of which that I kind of got out of here, because that's kind of the guy that they kind of consistently mention. And immediately, like this is to kind of have me remember the Ryan Gosling movie that he did with like the astronaut movie, because that's basically right around like Neil Armstrong and so kind of time period. And so like I don't remember what that kind of was. I don't remember what the title of the movie was, but if you probably go and stroll through, I think it was called like the first or something like that, or the first astronaut or something like that. But it was like one of those like you can easily tell it's one of those like Ryan Gosling astronaut movies. There's very few of those, so you probably go through Google and easily and quickly find it, but I couldn't have been bothered. So Stan goes on and is to make it onto the moon, goes on and gets all these samples, and then is to, of course, go back into his little spaceship thing. And I don't know the specific titles of it all, because there's a lot of specifics within this movie, and I dare say I don't rather want to go on and explain every specific of this movie. I really just don't. So, and that's the sad thing about me. It's just like I don't want to go into the every tiny little thing for this movie, because it's just like, why? Uh, really, for a lot of people, they can get the gist of what this movie is by me talking about it. Uh, as far as like the beginning of it is, and then just me going into like the real specifics about this, notching it all down and whatever. Like, we also had the one moment where the kids were going on and starting to see like hippies, and everybody was like asking their, like, all the kids were asking their mother, it's like, well, hey, is that guy a hippie? Because he has long hair. And so their like, they would go on and have to ask their mother about like what is a hippie and what is not a hippie, and I just thought that was funny. So yeah, so Stan is to go on and to have like done the whole space thing, and is to make his way back to Earth all safe and sound and whatever have you. Everything just easily worked out. And so we really have it at the end of this where all the kids are going on and watching the other astronauts going on and landing on the moon, and that all the kids are going and watching this happening, and it's fairly late at night, and so we get to where the kids are starting to all fall asleep while watching all this happen. And Stan's dad is kind of like, man, I hope every single one of these kids were to have gone on and see like these guys like stepping onto the moon, because I'm sure every single grand kid of theirs is going to be asking like, hey, where were you when where were you when like you saw like moon landing and everything like that? Because we have Stan's father that, of course, to work with NASA, and so like Stan's mom is like looking at Stan's dad is like, hey, like, are you okay about this? Are you stressing out about this? Because technically, like, Stan's dad is to work with NASA technically, and so like for every success that NASA is to have, like, it's technically a success for Stan's dad here, and so like he wasn't freaking out or anything. He was just like, okay, like this is just like another normal day. So, and this has to be treated that way. So we go on, and uh, we of course have Stan here that is to have his parents just kind of rattle off and just say, it's like, well, even if like Stan was to not actually see them, like see the astronauts kind of taking their first steps, I'm sure at some point he's going to go on and tell his kids that he was to see them anyways, just because like he probably didn't remember it all that correctly because it's a number of years later. So we also had the moment where Stan's dad was kind of mentioning for a lot of his kids to go on to this Houston's Disney World, and of course we had certain kids that were kind of working at that time period, so it's like, okay, well, anybody else? And so it seems that Stan was to go on to this kind of like their version of Disney World in Houston, and so they go on and explain about all these rides and all these things that were to go on, and you could shout one thing into this one cave, and there'd be this little gap, and there'd be this other cave where you go on and you hear whatever you shouted in that other cave. So that was kind of funny. And it seems that at one point there would be this like abominable snowman that would just kind of jump out and scare somebody. And at one point, you'd have one other abominable snowman that is kind of taking a smoke break, and you kind of see him uh, like kind of just puffing it out with his mask off, and they were just like, "Ugh, you faker." And the guy would be like, "Ma, like I don't care, I'm taking a smoke break." So kind of funny. So so yeah, it seems like there were certain rides that kids needed to get there fairly quickly, so that way they can go on and uh, kind of get there before the lines start to like really pile up. That's kind of like in a lot of state fairs where you kind of want to go on and get to certain foods right in the early part of the day, because the later that you kind of wait out, you're not going to be able, like, it's going to take hours for you to get one like little thing of food, and it's not going to feel worth it, to where you're just like, man, I could have gotten 8 different foods by the time I'm waiting in this one line. It just doesn't make sense. So hence why you probably wouldn't want to go on to a state fair and get the most popular food, or the food that it's like, man, I've never tried these before and I desperately finally want to. No. Like, you're just gonna have to go on to be like, okay, well, I'm gonna go to whatever place just has no lines or the shortest line and be able to try that, and that's gonna just be good enough for me. So we go on and we I think I feel like for me I could almost just kind of wrap this up here because there could be a bajillion fulfilling things that I honestly could continue to say for this review. Um, but yeah, I think I've covered technically most of this movie. And so, yeah, so I feel like completely kind of to my knowledge, like I'm sure if I would go on and watch this movie again, I'd be like, oh, this is the 30 things that I missed out about. Um, but really, when looking at it, when you go into this movie, you're going to get your own perspective, and there's going to be a bunch of things that I probably forgot here. So let me know in the comments below the number of things that I probably forgot or didn't bother to mention, because I didn't want to go on and have this be like a 3 hour review of this movie that I think is only like an hour and a half, of them just thoroughly explaining all of this stuff in utter detail. So let me know in the comments below about Apollo 10 and a half, A Space Age Childhood, because at the end of the day, I'm going to get the heck out of here. With that said, I'm just going to get. We also had moments where they go on and talk about uh, like political stuff in this movie. Talk about how certain people were to kind of feel about that time, where we had certain people that were to go on and say that instead of spending all of that money to go on and have them go into outer space, why not all spend that money to like help the starving people of America, just kind of like feed them. And like we had certain members of this family that were like, hey, right on, like have it to be like, instead of wasting all this money on like the space race, how about go on and like cure world hunger, or or try to do something else to just kind of help like the less fortunate. And we had, of course, other moments where like certain people were debating certain things, and so like Stan's dad was kind of pitching in, kind of like, you know what, I don't even know why like this woman is even on like this thing, having her say and this and that. And so, and we also have certain people that were going on and trying to like watch certain like late night shows because certain celebrities were on there. And like, of course, Stan's sisters were wanting to desperately go on and listen to certain interviews, while of course a lot of kids are wanting to finish up and watch certain movies. So it's kind of debating about whether or not what they're to have really have done with the TV, because a lot of times everybody was just kind of like who could get to the TV fastest to watch what they wanted to watch. I think when I was like a lot younger, I think that was kind of like the battle too, where it's like, man, I want to just kind of get up the earliest so I can go on and kind of get to watch a certain number of TVs shows, and then after everyone else was to get up, they can get their own like time with the TV. But I was like, oh man, if I could just kind of get up the earliest and be able to watch a certain number of things, and then everyone else could get their time. Probably hence why I would probably mostly go on and like watch stuff late at night where everyone else was just kind of asleep. So I can go on and be like, oh cool, I get to watch all these movies and whatever. Um, and like I thought that was like great because all I cared about really was watching movies over like television, which a lot of television would just or a lot of TV shows would just be on during the day. So I felt like I was like, yeah, I get to watch all these movies and like all these late night films that were really fun and really great and whatever. Um, and I always liked that when I was like a kid. So with that said, I'm gonna get out of here. Bye, buddy. Bye, bye.